Afternoon, everybody. We'll just give kind of 60 to 90 seconds or so for everybody to filter into this session, and then we'll get underway. So we'll just give it a tiny bit extra time because the numbers are stabilizing now of entry, so we'll just give them a tiny bit extra and then we'll get going. So it looks like we've kind of stabilized some people coming into the session now. So we'll make a start on the session. Thank you very much all for joining us today. I'll just introduce our panelists for today first and give you guys an overview of the content before we dive into today's presentation. So on the call today, we have myself, Kevin Berry, the Finance Director at Bloom Procurement Services. We have Ben Dara, who is our Provide 2 product owner. We have Abby Lindsay, who is our Head of Central Government and Blue Light. She heads up that team for us. We have Paul Mander, our Procurement Director, and facilitating the webinar as a whole, we have Alex Wright, our Senior Marketing Exec. So today we wanted to talk to you primarily about the service delivery plan process and the submission process for that within Bloom. You may hear us refer to it as SDPs throughout, but we will try to stick to service delivery plan as we can, so we don't kind of lose anybody in the acronyms. And I will give us a kind of high-level overview of the downstream kind of end-to-end invoicing process first at a high level before talking specifically about some of the key points of the SDPs from my perspective. Ben is going to give us a demonstration of that service plan and what the screens look like actually in the system and talk you through how that works and what might have changed of late. Then we're going to have a quick pause for any Q&As around that part of the webinar. If you do have questions throughout, please pop them into the Q&A box and we will answer them initially at that point, and we will do a kind of follow-up Q&A session as the end. If there are any that we don't get to throughout the session, we will address them and answer them offline as well. So please put as many questions in there as you like, and we will get through them either during the session or offline afterwards. And then we have Abby and Paul with us today from the more procurement side of our business, and they are going to take you through more broadly some of the different things that Bloom can offer and some of the ongoing activity they see in the marketplace in which we operate at the moment, and give you their take on kind of current affairs and what's going on. And then, as I say, we will wrap up with a final Q&A. So if that sounds good to everybody, we'll move through. So really first, I just wanted to give you guys an oversight again, and thank you for joining this webinar. If you've been to any of the previous supplier webinars, you may recognize this slide, but we like to give this overview in case there's any new people joining us today. So this process is set out assuming that you run a NIPRO contract through us on our NIPRO framework on our Provide 2 platform, which is 99.9% of everything we do. But if this doesn't apply to you, feel free to engage with us afterwards and we can pick up some separate specifics. But this is very much the core of our process, and this is very much the downstream process. So it assumes you've already become an accredited supplier, you've already been awarded a piece of work, you've got a signed work order, and you're delivering that piece of work, and you're ready now to get into that invoicing and service delivery plan submission process. So the first step once you're into that piece of work, that delivery, is to, when you've reached a milestone, is to create a service delivery plan in our Provide2 system, which Ben is going to give you the demonstration of in a moment, and we're going to dive into in a bit more detail. And really, this is you effectively notifying the buying authority and us that you've reached a milestone, providing some detail about what you've delivered and the value of that part of your delivery. And this is really going to start the ball rolling of the invoicing process, the payment cycle, as you'll kind of see through the next few steps that we go. So once you've made that submission and you've put in the details of what you've delivered as part of that original work order and the value of that, that goes to the relevant signatory within our buying authority, whoever we're dealing with, to either approve or reject, although it's very rare, to review that submission. And they will look at the information you've provided and the attachments, the value, the detail of that submission, and they will decide to approve that service delivery plan that you've submitted. That is really a very key step, the submission and approval, because that is the point at which all of the invoicing process is triggered and the payment terms begin. So once they've pressed that approval button, 3 invoices are actually raised at that point. Bloom will invoice the buyer for the cost of the milestone that has been delivered. Bloom will also raise a management fee to you guys as the supplier to us of that service, and Bloom will raise a self-billed invoice on your behalf, which is your invoice to Bloom effectively. And for those people who weren't able to attend, previously we ran a webinar that focused specifically around the self-billing element of that process, and actually that a video and a recording of that webinar can still be accessed on our YouTube channel. If anybody can't find that for whatever reason, feel free to get in touch. We'll flash some contact details up at the end, and we'll make sure that everybody can access that as well. And then from that invoicing point, that's when the payment process kicks in. So generally speaking, across our NIPRO frameworks, payment terms are either pay when paid plus 14 days or 30 days from that approval point. So that approval point really is key to that process, which all hinges around the quality of the submission that you guys put in as well. So that is what triggers the invoicing and all of the payments. So now to take you through kind of some of the key points within a service delivery plan from kind of my perspective before we hand over to Ben and have a look at what the screen looks like and how the process is designed to work. Really, the submission you do at this stage should reflect the value and the milestones that were agreed in the work order up front. So there shouldn't be any surprises here for anybody. It should be a case of logging in, finding the relevant milestone in your service delivery plan, submitting that milestone, entering the value, and any kind of key details or key report attachments that the buying authority might need at this point. So that is the crux of what we're doing here. If there are any changes of scope, it is worth pointing out that if a value of a project is increased or a milestone is increased that takes the overall value of the project differently, we can address that through change control notes, as you'll see they're identified as CCNs. So we do have mechanisms to deal with change as well throughout this process. Another key point is that the value at this point should always be entered as net of VAT. So we don't deal with any submissions in a gross sense. If you are VAT registered, everything that goes through this part of our process is net of VAT. That value is also the value that our 5% management charge is calculated based on. So whatever value is submitted as part of your service delivery plan is how we will then calculate our fee that we charge to yourselves. And it is only at that point that the service delivery plan is approved, which any of the self-billed invoices or the management fees. So our management fees are emailed across to yourselves on your dedicated email contact that you've kind of set with us, and the self-billed invoices are downloadable from our Provide2 portal. Again, if anybody has trouble accessing any of those bits of information, it is covered in the prior webinar we did, which is, as I said, is available on the YouTube channel. But again, if any of those points you don't think you've had covered previously, feel free to contact us on any of the details that that we flash up at the end, and we will address any questions, as I say, after Ben has done an initial demonstration. So now that we've reached that point, I will hand over to Ben, who will give us a look at the service delivery plan submission and how that all works from a practical point of view in the system. So over to you, Ben.
Thank you, Kev. Okay, hi all. So first up, just starting point is your login on Provide 2 on the dashboard. So the first thing you'll need to do there is find the service delivery plan for the project you're wanting to submit for. Easiest way to do that is using the sourcing navigation on the left-hand side and down to contracts and my contracts. Within there, you'll find all of your active contracts that you've currently got. You can see the project name, code, and the start and end date, as well as the current status of that contract as well, both active and expired. And from there, you can click in to the contract heading. Within here, this will give you overview of the project information, but the key bit is the actions here on the second level down. This is going to take you through to your service delivery plan for the project. Within here we have our milestones, and we can organize them in a number of ways. Best is probably end date. This will show you then the delivery plan for your project as set out within the work order. So for each of the milestones contained within that work order, we will actually have two lines within the service delivery plan. We have the SDP line and we have the approval line. So the SDP line is the submission for yourselves, in which you're going to submit your value and the project update. And then we have the approval line, which is the buyer's line for marking the approval of that submission by yourselves. Current couple of statuses in here, we've got in progress and complete. So when you submit your submission for a milestone, so for example, the discovery phase, it will change to completed. And then as soon as the buyer goes in, reviews and approves, it will then change to completed as well. As soon as you have a pair of lines in completed status, this is when your self-billing invoice is going to generate and the payment terms will begin. So to submit for yourselves, you're going to find the milestone, the SDP line that you want to submit against and click in. And within here, you'll find messages, details, and the collaboration area, which is the form against which you're going to submit your information. So you're going to scroll down. Now, this is where we've recently changed the structure of the form to make it easier to understand and easier to use. So we've brought all of the financial information to the top of the form. You've got your PO line description, your work order line description. So that's your milestone. You've got your total agreed payment schedule value, which is at the start of the contract. And you've got your remaining available. So that's total agreed value minus anything you've already billed against that line. And you can bill against the line repeatedly. So that remaining value will reduce as time goes by. We've then got the invoicing section. So here we have removed the question that used to be here at the start of February around do you want to bill for the full line value or a partial line value? Now you're just always going to input your invoice value into a text box there. We've got the expenses as before. So do you have your expenses, yes or no? And if yes, input and attach receipts. And then finally, the project status questions come following. So to input, as we did before, we click on the edit, scroll down and input our invoice value. This is that net figure that Kev referred to and needs to be equal to or less than the remaining value that's available on that line. If that is not what you expected, or if you do need to submit for a higher value, then get in touch with your ProcOps operations contact and they'll be able to advise you on the next steps for that. But in terms of inputting at this point, you're going to input your net value within there. Now that could be the total line value or anything below that, depending on the need of that piece of work. And then your expenses, if yes or no. If yes, input your expense value and click to attach any receipts. And that's it there for invoicing. So unlike before where we had the question around, do you want to invoice for the full line value? If no, input the invoice. You're just always going to input that invoice value within that field. Next up is your project status. So outcome delivery, just to confirm you delivered all outcomes as expected, yes or no. The status of the project, whether on track, any minor delays or major delays, and whether there's any change in trend around those deliveries, so no change, better or worse. You've then just got your deliverables for that period to input into the first box, and the planned deliverables for the next period after that. And that's it for the status update. So review what you've input. You're going to first save. And that saves the form information. And then critically, you've got to complete the action once, which is going to give you the option to put any comments, which can be passed over to the buyer if needed. And then twice, which is going to change it from in progress through to completed. When I go back into the service delivery plan, you will then see that that SDP line, your submission line, is updated to completed. And at that point, a notification will have gone through to the buyer. They will access that information submitted, review, and go on to approve. So when they do approve, this line will change. So the second approval line will go to completed. As I say, that is then when the self-billing invoice will generate. Now, if you've invoiced fully for the line, that remaining value is going to change to 0. If, however, you've had a partial invoice against the line previously, that line value will change. So the remaining value will change to minus anything you've then invoiced and it's gone through. The line itself will be reopened and the invoice value will be zeroed for you to then submit against again. And there, again, same process against the remaining value that is above the invoice value. So that's it for the service delivery plan and the change in structure. And now over to you if there's any questions.
So yes, as we said, if you do have any questions, feel free to pop them into the Q&A box, which should be at the bottom of the screen. We've got a couple coming through, so I'll read these out and we'll answer them with whoever's appropriate. We'll pass them on to. And if there are any that come through that we can't answer, we will, as I say, pick them up offline and get back to you. So we've had a question from Sue. Sue says, do we not need to attach the invoice? Now, we don't need to attach invoice submissions to service delivery plans. So as part of your accreditation and signing a work order process, you guys have signed up to something called self-billing. So that basically means when that service delivery plan is approved, we raise your invoice to us on your behalf. So there's no need to attach an invoice, and actually as part of the self-billing agreement, you've agreed not to raise invoices that will be distributed externally, kind of from your side. So no, there's certainly no need to attach an invoice. We control all of the invoicing throughout the process to make it as light touch and as admin free for you guys as possible. We have a couple of questions in from Jane. The first one is, I've just looked at my Provide2 account. Can I find any actions for the work order that I have in progress? Why might this be? Ben, is there a obvious answer to that?
If there's no actions there, it will likely be either because the contract approval and the generation of the work order hasn't been completed yet. So when the work order is created, that actually pulls through and creates that plan beneath the contract, or there's something wrong with your access rights in terms of what's been set up. So we can have a look at that. So if you want to drop an email at the end through, and we can pick up that, I can double check and make sure there's nothing wrong with your access. That should be there for any active contract.
Yeah, definitely. If you can send us the specifics on that, we can drill into the specific circumstances around it. That would be great. The following question: the deliverables boxes are quite small, even when enlarged, that you're trying to enter information into. Is there anything within the system we can do with that, Ben, or is it something?
It is something we are looking to do. The box, yeah, there is more room there to input characters, but unfortunately, yeah, at the moment they are slightly small on the screen, and they do grow slightly, but yeah, not as much. We are looking to improve that, so there's more space. You can see your full answer, but for the moment, it will remain how it is.
And the final question we've got at this point before we move into Paul and Abby's update is, how do we know, as a supplier, if there is an STP that's been delayed due to over invoicing or any other reason? So I guess this is where a supplier would submit their service delivery plan and something happens to delay that process. Is there any way the supplier can see then? I guess the first point is you can see whether the buyer's line has been completed or not then for that approval step. Are there any other things the suppliers can watch out for at that point?
Yeah, so within the system, yeah, as you say, if it's not approved, that's the first element that it's waiting on. Our operations team manage the full process within the background. So in terms of as soon as you've submitted, there's a process of chasing buyers, and if they haven't approved within a certain number of days, and we will be in contact with them to ensure that happens. If there are any issues or blockers that are preventing it from happening, they will then be in touch with you to update you on that and to make sure we're going through as smoothly and as quickly as possible. There is also the notes within the system. So if a buyer does respond back and adds a comment to that, they will give you an update on any blockers or any other issues within that comments field on their approval line, which you'll be able to see as well.
Yeah, and I guess just to add, the question there specifically asked about over invoicing as well. If, for example, there has been a change in scope and of work, or the value of the project has increased for any reason, and that's not picked up by us in advance of you getting to the service delivery plan submission. Once that goes in, if it is over the original agreed value, we will pick that up through our processes and implement any change control notices that I referenced earlier, kind of as and when required. So we will pick those things up at that point once they've been submitted, and it gets flagged to us internally through the system and our processes if we're not already aware of that through discussions with yourself or the buyer. So with that, we are going to move on to Abby, who's going to give us her update for today.
Thanks, Kev. Afternoon, everyone. Hope everyone is well. So this afternoon, I'm going to touch on current challenges out there in the market, green paper proposals, and how Bloom can help. So I think in terms of current challenges, one that I'll talk about this afternoon, which I think is quite prevalent at the minute, it's certainly a hot topic in the press, is PPN 0121, which is procurement in an emergency, and what are the risks around that from a supplier perspective. So to me, the key ones being unequal treatment to suppliers and non-disclosure of award notices. So that is very prevalent in the press. So I don't know if everyone watched Matt Hancock this morning getting a bit of a grilling from Piers Morgan on Good Morning Britain today, with not his Department of Health and Social Care last year, through the start of the pandemic, having to undertake a number of emergency procurements, but then didn't actually publish and disclose the award notices on the back of those. So I don't know as well if you've noticed, but I certainly have. There's been a flurry of award notices appearing in the public domain from various government departments. So Department of Health and Social Care, they've actually breached their own transparency policy, which does require the publication of details of public contracts worth more than £10,000. So what are the challenges to suppliers? So I think point 8 in the PPN is definitely worth going through there. So in the PPN on point 8, it does say that it is important that contracting authorities continue to achieve value for money and use good commercial judgment and sound decision making in an emergency, including when they do make direct awards. So authorities need to manage these in the context of the broader risk of not being able to secure the required goods or services in a timely manner. And the potential risks include poor value for money, such as abnormally high pricing. So how do government departments manage the pricing when they're in an emergency? How do they manage value for money? One thing that Bloom can do is, we can do a compliant direct award, but we can also manage the value for money aspect for the client, and then the end of that for the taxpayer. Also an equal treatment of suppliers in the procurement process. So if you're the supplier at the the receiving end of the direct award, then there's no opportunity there for any other suppliers in the market, which is not really fair, open and transparent. And then there's also a risk that comes with poor practice due to procuring at speed, so such as retrospective contract awards or retrospective due diligence checks. So what checks have actually been carried out on those suppliers, what accreditation process have they gone through. Again, something that Bloom are already undertaking is we're procuring at speed, in some cases retrospective contracts, but I guess where we one of the benefits of using Bloom is we have already gone through that accreditation process with our suppliers. So for our suppliers to get into our marketplace, they have gone through an accreditation and due diligence process. So we've already done that, the checks and balances from that perspective. And I think the last risk to mention with procuring in an emergency is the lack of documentation around key procurement decisions, including how conflicts of interest are identified and managed. And that is kind of, I think, quite present at the minute with, have conflicts of interest, have certain people's friends been awarded these contracts, and what was the actual the governance and decisions made around how that route to market was then decided on. And I guess that is kind of, you can see that now with the award decisions that are now appearing on the likes of Tussle and Contracts Finder from becoming up a year ago now. So I don't know, Paul, have you got anything else to add on challenges before I move on to green paper?
No, I think just to say that, from from our buyers that we're working with, from their perspective, they are familiarising themselves with all of the procurement policy notes that are coming out, and they're looking to Bloom to kind of support them with the delivery of these. So, there are other examples, things like social value, where actually central government in particular is now mandated to include social value in all of their contracting activity. And actually Bloom can really help with that. And you as suppliers that are already kind of delivering some of these things can actually start to showcase some of the brilliant work that you're already doing. So it's just to consider kind of how we can support you to showcase some of that fantastic work, whilst also helping our public sector buyers to kind of meet their requirements of these procurement policy notes.
Thanks, Paul. So the other hot topic at the minute in public sector procurement are the green paper proposals. So I think firstly to say that myself as a public sector procurement professional over 18 years, I warmly welcome the consultation. It's a great opportunity to make significant change. And from a supplier perspective, the ethos and heart of the paper seeks to drive continuous commercial improvement across the public sector, enabling buyers and suppliers to be innovative and operate within a less bureaucratic environment, which I'm sure we're all, we're all happy to hear that. So, looking at opening public contracts to more small businesses and social enterprise to innovate in public service delivery. Some areas of interest for me that kind of stand out are single uniform set of rules, so a reduction in the 350 plus current regulations to one single uniform framework. And I think every supplier out there will welcome that with open arms. Also a reduction in the procedures, so going down from 7 to 3 again, which will be much more remove a lot of complexity, not only for suppliers who are bidding, but for buyers as well when they're deciding on which procedure and their route to market. And open framework agreements with multiple joining points. So, you apply to go through a lot of work to apply to get onto a framework, and you're told that you're unsuccessful, then that is closed for you and for the next 4 years. So this is a welcome change, I think, to then put in points where that list, if you like, can be reviewed. So the consultation remains open to public until 10th of March, and Bloom will definitely be responding to that consultation. And I guess in all of that, you know, how can Bloom help? Just touching on what Paul said, Bloom are already performing in that manner, in that way. We're operating in that way, in a flexible manner. So, you know, selecting from our dynamic supplier marketplace, we can, from a buyer's perspective, identify and support shortlisting of appropriate services and suppliers. So we can work with the buyer to engage new suppliers, SMEs, charities, to really open up that marketplace. I mentioned it before, but all of our suppliers are onboarded via a robust and detailed accreditation process to verify their capability. So again, when you're speaking to your customers and they're looking for a compliant route to market, then, you know, if you are in our marketplace, then that is a, you know, that is a benefit to them, because you've already gone through an accreditation process. So that will kind of tick boxes from a compliance perspective. Speed to market, so all of this, so the procuring in an emergency, we're already doing this. So speed to market, we can turn around a direct award in as little as 13 days and a mini competition in 23. We have been known to actually turn procurement round in less than that when we need to, if it is very critical. And then as well, you know, finally, value for money. So how can we ensure that, you know, just by going through an emergency procurement doesn't actually mean that your hands are tied behind backs and that you have to go with whatever price is kind of given to you. You know, we can really help the client by ensuring value for money, using our insight, pulling on procurement and category experts within the organisation. And then, you know, in terms of tangible benefits, we're saving customers on average between 11 and 19% on budget. So, you know, customers and buyers have got a you know, in terms of an emergency, they can come to us. We've got a rapid route to market, but we can also ensure a value for money as well. So kind of eliminating the risks that I talked about at the start here under the challenges. Paul, have you got anything else to add on that before you move on to your slide?
No, I think, I mean, from our point of view, you kind of very clearly kind of covered some of the things that we're doing. I think, as you will all be aware, kind of as suppliers within the marketplace, we kind of operate in the way that I think the public sector would like to see procurement working in the future. So I think it's really, really positive, and anything that we can do to help, I think, is why we're here. Anything else to add, Abby?
No, nothing from me, so over to you.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Well, look, I just wanted to give a very short overview about some kind of wider opportunities with Bloom. As Kevin alluded to earlier, there's a kind of significant proportion of our work is delivered via the NEET Pro 3 framework, and aligns with kind of everything that we've discussed today around the SDP process and kind of the work that Ben kind of showed you in terms of from a system point of view, but then also kind of how we deliver through the NEET Pro 3 framework is very much aligned with some of the expectations around public sector procurement going forward. But my role at Bloom is very much to consider kind of how we can develop our service offering through NEET Pro 3 as a framework that exists currently, but also how suppliers can also benefit from other opportunities that we have available to us and to you. So I've made reference here to our positions that we hold on Crown Commercial Services frameworks, both MCF 1 and MCF 2. So we are actually sat, and I will add to this slide just the individual lots in these areas. So on MCF, we are on lot 6, which is around education provision. So that is kind of professional services related to education. And that's available for use by any public sector body. And for you as a supplier, if organisations that you are dealing with are looking for routes to market, perhaps are not using the NEET Pro framework but are familiar with MCF, then actually we can work with you to kind of support you with putting bids in for those where you don't already have a position on those frameworks. In MCF 2, we actually hold a position on 2 lots, which is the kind of general business consultancy, and also around supply chain and procurement. So we're on 2 lots under there. So again, if there are organisations that you're working with who want to procure you via that route, then we can offer that as a route to market for you. We regularly bid for work as well. So actually, on more of a reactive basis, we do see competitions come out through MCF and MCF2. And I know there are some contact details kind of on the following slide. And if some of you on the call want to talk a little bit more about what that means and how to get involved, then I'm more than happy to have a conversation with you. And broader than that, really, we're always on the lookout for kind of wider partnership opportunities, whether that is bidding for new frameworks, or whether that is working with suppliers to kind of support you more around different areas. We would kind of offer this out to all of our suppliers. We very much work in a neutral space. There are certain things that you will have seen, I'm sure, through LinkedIn. We do a lot of this webinar type approach, but we also have kind of Q&As that we do with individual suppliers. And we also do kind of broader engagement with buyers as well through some of our kind of regular webinars. For example, we have one this week, which is focused around social care. And actually what we're looking for as a result of that is to spark conversations, to kind of develop our relationships with buyers and suppliers, and ultimately to look for new opportunities for you. You know, we want new opportunities to come into the marketplace and for us to be able to offer those out. So I think broader than that, we also have the NIPRO 3 framework, which obviously, as I say, makes up a big proportion of all of the work that we do. And actually, NIPRO 3 offers a lot of flexibility. Abby alluded to kind of a lot of references in the Transforming Public Procurement Green Paper about flexibility and about how we kind of manage that going forward. Well, actually, we are doing a lot of that now, and NIPRO 3 does offer quite a bit of flexibility. And if there are particular areas of professional services consultancy where you feel they are not covered through NIPRO 3, there is some scope to be flexible within that framework to allow us to add additional subcategories. So if there are areas where you think, actually, this is a big opportunity, it's something we want to explore, then actually we can help you to do that through the framework. And I'm happy to have that conversation with you. We have relationships very closely. We work really closely with the North East Procurement Organisation, who own the NIPRO 3 framework. We also have very key strategic kind of partnerships with the Department for Education, where we are the only approved route to market for professional services. So if you're working in the school space or education, then actually we can absolutely help you there. And finally, we work really closely with Crown Commercial Services, given our place on the MCF and MCF2 frameworks. So with all that in mind, if there are kind of any areas that you want to explore in more detail, there's some contact details coming up on the following slide, and I'm happy to kind of talk to you all individually about how that may pan out. So I think now I am going to hand back over to Kev for a short Q&A session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul and Abby. That was a great update. And as you guys say, you know, there's a lot of talk in the press and kind of current affairs about what's gone on in public procurement over the last 12 months. And Bloom is very much in a very good place to solve some of the problems that already exist. So a great summary by you guys there. So if anybody does have any questions, as we said before, feel free to drop them into the Q&A box and we will answer them now. Or if we move on to the next slide, there are some contact details here as well if anybody wants to send in any queries separately. We will address them. We've currently got nothing in the Q&A box, which means you guys were perfectly clear and very understandable, which is excellent. Unless there's anything else from anybody on the panel, I think we will close it there, and we wish you all a good day and have a good week ahead, and we'll hopefully catch up with you as we run this series of supplier webinars as we go on. But as we say, feel free to get in touch with it on anything else on screen, and we will make a recording of this webinar available on the YouTube channel should you wish to watch it back, as well as distributing the slides attendees. So thank you very much for attending. We wish you all the best, and we will speak to you all soon.